Assignment education on KET is made possible with generous support from
the Kentucky Community and Technical College System. 16 colleges working together to educate skilled workers and create better lives for a better Kentucky.
The Pritchard Committee for Academic Excellence is committed to engaging Kentuckians on education issues and closing achievement gaps, building a groundswell for better education, early childhood through college. Learn more at pritchardcommittee.org.
I'm Sam Corbett on Assignment Education, the show that seeks out the positive things that are happening in our Kentucky schools. We examine challenges facing both students and teachers, and we look for solutions to those problems. This time, how childhood trauma can affect behavior and academics, and how teachers can be better equipped to address the issues. Plus,
this is an entirely new way of teaching.
Racial equity in the classroom, and a new approach to teaching American history.
Bring the humanity of people who are impacted by the history.
And how the influx of international students into Kentucky is translating into a community program that serves everyone's interest.
This program really is about bringing community together.
And we begin in Jefferson County, at the place where education begins for those coming to America for the first time. With over 100,000 students in JCPS schools, more than 14,000 speak English as their second language.
We have more schools that have ESL programs in them now than we ever have.
Eli Beardsley runs the ESL Intake Center, located on the lower level of Hazelwood Elementary.
We have 148 languages this year.
Kirundi, Kinyarwanda.
Some Slavic languages.
I understand 11 teams.
We actually have 5 assessment facilitators, and between them there are 17 languages represented.
Swahili, Kikongo,
Somali,
Arabic,
and even some German.
And there's one language here that everyone speaks.
The most important language that we speak is kindness.
Always.
Most of the facilitators are refugees themselves, so they can communicate and relate to every parent and child who comes through these doors.
The field and the channel.
When I see parents and their children coming here, I see myself.
I was one of those refugees.
Berta Weinberg came to Louisville from Cuba 22 years ago.
So I was an ESL mom.
Now, she's helping others make the transition, just like she did.
Our role is to make sure those kiddos receive the best education and become solid, productive citizens.
And thanks to a new community-wide partnership, international students are not only learning, they're also giving back, lending their knowledge from abroad to help others who want to further their education. I'm here with two people who are integral to this program that we're going to talk about today, both from the Office of Globalization with Metro Louisville, Sabine and Ava. Thanks for joining us, ladies.
Thanks, Sam. Thanks for having us.
Ava, tell us a little bit about this program.
Of course, Lingo, it is an online exchange program that people can join from here from Louisville if they have an interest in practicing or improving a language skill. We basically started this project in collaboration with the International Students Office in UFL, University of Louisville, also with GCTC as well, with the International Student Department, and also with the Newcomer Academy at GCPS.
So Sabine, this is a program that theoretically somebody like me who has an interest in learning to speak French, we could all be involved in this program, correct?
Absolutely. In fact, that's really where a lot of this came about. So when COVID-19 hit and we knew that we wanted to provide some opportunities for our immigrant families and students to really have a learning experience and have it be virtual, we also heard back a lot from the community members like yourself that said, well, how can we help our immigrant and foreign-born communities? What can we do? And we felt this was a really natural way to bridge that gap, a great way to introduce them to languages and cultures and be able to share in a very safe space.
How many languages would you anticipate that you're going to be able to offer at the beginning of the program?
Well, we know that Spanish is one that's very heavily used and spoken here in Louisville. So that's going to be one that will be easy to find mentors for. I know for myself, I took Spanish in high school, and so it would be great for me to be able to brush up on just those skills and you know, really increase my fluency. French will be another one that's also predominant. We've also talked about some of the other really major languages in our city that our foreign-born and immigrants speak. Like we talked about Kinyarwanda, we talked about Somali and Swahili and Hindi, but it really is going to depend on, you know, the need of those folks that want to be part of the program.
So Ava, this is going to be totally online, correct?
Correct, yes.
And so tell me a little bit about how it's going to work. So I have an interest in French, and I'd like to join some conversations to improve my bad French. So what will I do once you're ready to start?
Yeah, absolutely. So the basis of this program it is to have people that had interest in learning a language or improving a language, right? But we also tie this program to a second thing, which it will be what other interests will you have? So let's say you have the interest of practicing your French, would like to improve, but you also happen to be a fan of music or travel or food. So what we do is we have a survey for people that wants to apply for this program, and then we match them based on your two interests. What language is the language you want to practice, what level you are at, and also what is your second most interesting things you would like to talk about it. Then we have mentors. This survey that we just finished and that we just go back with the data it was to identify these mentors that will be able to lead the conversations. So it's not just about having a time, having a Zoom link, and you guys figure it out. It is more about having someone that can guide, and it's going to be most likely native speakers of the target language, and be able to facilitate conversation around those topics that we also are a huge fan of.
So if I have an interest in French and I have an interest in exploring and talking about French culture or French food or more importantly maybe French wine, then I would be paired up with most likely a native born speaker. And would I be working with several other people? Will there be small groups in the conversations? How will that work, Sabine?
Yeah, so that's exactly, you've hit it right on the head. That's exactly what we're hoping to do. We're hoping to pair them up, not too many large groups, because we want everybody to have an opportunity to speak and have an understanding and really learn about the cultures, about the wine, about the language, and practice their fluency. This isn't necessarily to replace a class or any grammar or punctuation, but it really is to learn or better adapt your fluency, and doing that through topics that you have an interest in. So SAMU could probably spend a afternoon for an hour or so talking with a group of 8 or 9 other people around French wine in French.
Ava, is there any cost to be involved in this program?
No, it's actually absolutely free. This is a program, as we were mentioning, the heart and the soul of this program is to bring community together. So one of our priorities, it is the exchangement. Like Sabine was saying, this is not a class. It is not a one-way path. It is something that we want people to exchange and to learn from each other. So learning and meeting people from other parts of the world, learning about other cultures, learning about the language, and also finding that those people live here in Louisville, learning or having new friends, friendly faces here in Louisville. So absolutely free.
I know you all are rolling this program out over the next several months. How would I find out more information about the program? Would I go to the Metro Louisville website? What's the easiest way to find out about the program?
Right. At this point, we are working in having this officially be launched by Lift the Loop. So that will be the platform that we are going to be looking as the main stage. However, the Office for Globalization, we do have a website as well that we're hoping to be hosting this as one of the informations. And again, we really rely on our partners. So I'm sure that GCTC and GCPS and also UFL will be great partners in spreading the word and keeping a place to host this program.
So I could reach out to any one of the partners. So Metro Louisville, Office of Globalization, the Newcomer Academy and JCPS, the JCTC, and also the University of Louisville.
Right, yes.
Thank you all for joining us today. I'm thinking my French skills are improving, literally as I'm sitting here anticipating participating in the program. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Sam.
Thank you.
We really appreciate having us.
Yeah.
Gwen Snow is the principal at Newcomer Academy, a school for beginning English learners who are just settling into our community. Tell us why this interested you and your team as far as getting involved in the project.
Well, we're always looking for ways for our students to meaningfully engage with fluent English speakers and also just other people from other backgrounds, basically. Our students have a lot of experiences already, and they're very strong as far as their diverse backgrounds, and they have a lot to share with our community. And so using that as an advantage to pair them up with local-born folks or just people from other parts of the world, and they can practice other languages. For our students, it's probably mainly English that they would practice, but they could pair up with someone else who wants to practice their Swahili or Spanish or whatever language that they choose.
So potentially your students could kind of be on both sides of this project. They could be, as native speakers, they could be helping people who might want to learn their native language, but then they would also want to work on their English skills, so they could kind of work both sides of it.
Right, and it goes beyond just learning a language. It's interacting with someone from a different part of town and a different part of the world, so that you really kind of get to learn a lot more about other people that are in our community, and also look at something that brings them together too. One of the things that you pick on the survey would be maybe not just your language that you're interested in, but some themes and hobbies as well.
So this is a new project, but have you seen a lot of interest from your students and their families to get involved with this?
Yes, we're starting to get that information out to them. Right now it's a little bit tough because it's summer and we had NTI going on, but we're getting that information out. We have summer programming and getting that out to students who are doing just some English classes online through the summer, and then this way they have a little bit of extra support and people that they can talk with, and our former students as well who want to continue practicing their English over the summer.
Great. Racial equality and social justice are certainly hot topics these days, and also a top priority in local schools. In fact, we're seeing some big changes in how kids are learning about American history.
Now, I told you 1 minute.
He puts the content in a way that we can understand it as students.
So why is that the case?
You can't change history, but you can change the way it's being taught. And that's exactly what they're doing here at Seneca High School.
This is an entirely new way of teaching that's based on questions.
Brandon Riddle has taught history for 11 years, but never like this. All right, so the way you're teaching today is a whole lot different than the way you were teaching first, second, third year.
All the way up through the first 10 years. We always try to come at the history with the perspective of the people who are impacted, as opposed to, you know, the history makers, the leaders, so to speak.
I thought it was just going to be another history class, but it turned out that it was a class about opinions.
What we're attempting to do now that's a lot different is it's about arguments.
We interact with each other.
It's definitely more of like a discussion, group-oriented thing. It's a democratic classroom as opposed to you sit there, you read this, you do this.
It's a class born from the racial equity policy at Jefferson County Public Schools.
The class that's created from this is African American Studies, and it's an elective.
Ryan New works at the district level, helping to revamp social studies curriculums.
Whose stories are we telling? Whose stories are we leaving out?
In the past, the curriculum focused more on just the history, I would say, and a lot of time the perspective of the people involved in the history got skewed.
No one's required to take notes or even test.
We're going to make our claims, we're going to defend them with evidence, and the better you're able to defend your arguments, the better your grade.
So if you have a different opinion, we're not going to judge you for it. We want to hear it. That's the whole goal, because teachers, they tell you something, that's what you believe. But what Mr. Riddle does as a teacher is he listens to everybody.
We need to prepare students to think critically and to be able to interact in their society and their community in a rational, reasoned manner.
You don't actually feel it.
Mr. Riddle, he's been a great teacher.
Interest level is definitely higher.
And I understood black culture more than my parents could teach me.
Meanwhile, at the University of Louisville, a cross-campus collaboration to study social justice has led to a new focus for teachers in training. I learned more about that when I sat down with 3 professors involved with the program.
Teacher preparation is very complicated.
Part of ensuring that every child gets a good education requires removing roadblocks along the way, like childhood trauma.
We know that trauma is everywhere.
Parents getting divorced can be very traumatic. For another child, it might not be. For another child growing up in an impoverished situation, or being in a community where there's a lot of violence, or in a household where there's violence.
Chantel Crosby is an associate professor at U of L's School of Social Work, now collaborating with the School of Education, teaching future teachers how to recognize trauma and what to do about it.
We know a lot more about the impact of trauma now than we ever have. I think we knew that there were these really difficult and challenging social and interpersonal issues that young folks were dealing with. We saw them in our schools, we knew that they were happening, but I don't think we understood the physiological, the neurological, the physical, cognitive, social, the way that it impacts all of these different domains of functioning.
Trauma can impact academic performance as well as behavior performance.
U of L's Penny Howe is a professor in residence working on location at Westport Middle School.
When we have our teacher candidates really focus maybe on an incident and think about it through a trauma lens, that they're noticing things like the importance of relationships in the classroom and how that impacts how students might respond to them.
To make connections, to do self-regulation.
Associate Professor Shelley Thomas tells me teaching future teachers has become a science.
So that we're using that brain science and bringing it into our education science.
Actually thinking through ways to address the trauma you're seeing rather than being punitive or just punishing behaviors that you're seeing. And then actively working against re-traumatizing.
There are structures in place, certainly that we can borrow from social work, to help us mitigate that and be effective teachers.
A curriculum to train teacher candidates on how to be trauma-informed in the classroom.
The program is part of a social justice research project at U of L that's already affecting change in local schools.
Really wanted to focus on promoting social justice research projects between faculty members across disciplines and with community members.
To look at how can we differentiate the learning and the experiences within the classroom that are flexible, that allow kids to express who they are in ways that still meet the standard. The school districts are working to do this, and our goal is to get this into teacher prep before they get there.
So integrating all that together is part of how we prepare the teachers to be ready to step into that system of care.
I'm here with two experts on the issue of childhood trauma and the impact it has on education. Judy Vanderhaar is with the Kentucky Department of Education. Glenna Hess is a retired administrator with Jefferson County Public Schools. Ladies, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
We all know that the world changed in the middle of March when the coronavirus issue began. Schools immediately shut down. We went to distance learning, or NTI as we call it in Kentucky. My question is, when we go back to school at some point, hopefully in August or September, obviously there's the impact that the whole experience has had on kids as it relates to the academic side, literacy, math, science. But there's also an issue that I think is equally or maybe more important, and that's the social, emotional impact, the impact that trauma in some cases has had on students, and how that's going to be dealt with. So can you talk a little bit, Judy, about how big an issue that is? Am I making too much of it, or is that really a significant problem?
No, absolutely don't think you're making too much of it. I think our education system as a whole, we're a little bit behind the times when it comes to understanding the nature of trauma and how we can support students and staff that are experiencing traumatic stress. So I think one of the biggest lessons from the closing of schools and this pandemic is, I think what's become very clear is that connection, social engagement, the connection we have with other people, with our friends, with our teachers, with each other is absolutely critical. And when we talk about trauma, traumatic events and experiences often happen through inappropriate relation. And so healing and the support to nurture us back to health, social and emotional health and well-being, healing happens in connection with others. So yeah, there's a lot of ramifications from this school closure and all of the time that children and young people have had away from those who have, for many kids, their main source of connection is at school. The only place they might get a smile is at school. And for some kids, as we know, might be the only place they eat. But I think, and I'm very hopeful actually that what we're going to learn from this experience is how critical the social and emotional aspect of our youth development, and also that we are paying a lot of attention to staff well-being as well, because we're all humans, and staff can be there for students, to the degree that they're able to be there and self-compassionate with themselves. So,
Glenna, how would a teacher approach that particularly that first couple weeks of school? Hopefully we're back in the classroom in the school buildings in the fall, and you've had at that point 6 months since the kids have been in school. What are the 2 or 3 things that a teacher would want to focus on?
It's going to be critical for them to establish or reestablish relationships and spending intentional time in making sure those things happen, where kids get to know each other, where they learn those social skills, again, how to work with one another, and the idea of how to respect one another, because they've been at home. They may have had no routines or procedures in place. So that's going to be critical, too, to make sure that classroom has come back together with the routines, the procedures, that students feel safe in knowing that those things are part of my classroom. But then again, feeling safe that those people are there to support me and to help me, whether it be the teacher or whether it be other students in the classroom.
There'll be a lot of pressure, I think, because we've missed so much time, to get in there and just, just break out of the, to use a horse racing analogy, to break out of the starting gate with a fast start, to try to make up all this lost time. But that might actually not be a good strategy.
No, you're exactly right, Sam. What needs to happen is they're going to fill this academic deficit. And we know it's there because students have been away from learning, and some may have engaged very well with the NTI and others may have not even tried to attempt it. But when we come back together, as Judy mentioned earlier, that social and emotional learning is more critical than ever, because actually, if you have a strong social and emotional climate in your classroom, you're going to go towards academic success. They work hand in hand. But I think teachers are going to feel that pressure as principals and district people that we've got to get these students back on track learning. And so if we push it too hard and don't spend that time, even when in the best of times, I would always tell teachers, first 2 weeks of school, don't teach, actually teach those social skills and teach that time to get to know each other so that we can play off of that the entire year. And when we think about social and emotional learning, it's not a 30-minute lesson. It's embedded throughout the whole day, throughout the academics. So you're going to put all of those pieces together holistically to make it a way that students learn and that students thrive and that students just feel safe and feel, which goes hand in hand with trauma, that they still feel safe with those people in that classroom. And then they'll learn more if they have those things in place.
Judy, what suggestions or advice would you have for parents or grandparents or caregivers as we approach what we hope is the beginning of the new school year, how they might help kids who have been with them basically 24/7 for 6 months? How would they help kids prepare to go back to school?
Having patience and understanding. But I did want to go back to something I said, which I think is important for parents as well, as especially in schools, that when we return, that we, the adults acknowledge in very clear ways and transparent ways what has happened. We can't skip over, and obviously beyond the pandemic, I mean, we have a lot of, uncovering of what's been underneath the surface with regards to racial trauma. So I think, part of what Glenna said in terms of offering, the first 2 weeks, in particular offering, and I think across the whole entire year, we need to create and offer spaces where we can have vulnerable and transparent conversations, courageous conversations, where everyone is allowed to express their feelings and process. When we come back, there are a lot of symptoms of traumatic stress that we need to be on the lookout for. And part of that social and emotional learning that we really need to facilitate with students to help normalize the traumatic stress and the symptoms that, are being expressed. So it could be, it could be aggression. It also could be withdrawal. So that it in many different ways. So I think, we need to help normalize that. So teaching kids what's going on in the brain, teaching kids and young people in middle and high schools what's happening physiologically when we have we're experiencing traumatic stress.
So Glenna, you would encourage and or coach, particularly a young teacher, to find creative ways to bring up some of these issues, whether it's the pandemic or some of the protests, the racial issues. I mean, that's something really that you need to find ways to have those discussions in the classroom?
Well, I think that if you have class meetings or morning meetings and you talk about topics that truly, that the kids are facing, and don't sugarcoat it because they're there, they're facing those things. And I look at the things happening in our community racially. If we've taught children to be respectful of differences, to be empathetic, and to develop compassion, and all of those things that are great buzzwords to say, but truly help them understand to walk in somebody else's shoes. There's great literature out there that you can read to students and let them take that idea of this is a book, but this could be happening to me too. So we find ways, and that's another way to bring the academics in through literature. But I think, as Judy said, the courageous conversations, they have to happen because they're going to happen whether we want them to or not. So we have to help and guide them to make those conversations, to provide that safe place where those conversations can occur. Because if there's not a sense of community, they're not going to talk about those things. They're not going to feel safe to have that conversation.
Ladies, thank you for your time. Great comments, and hopefully students throughout Kentucky will see this, have these conversations in their classrooms throughout the Commonwealth. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Sam Corbett, and we'll see you again with more good news on Assignment Education. Assignment Education on KET is made possible with generous support from
the Kentucky Community and Technical College System. 16 colleges working together to educate skilled workers and create better lives for a better Kentucky.
The Pritchard Committee for Academic Excellence is committed to engaging Kentuckians on education issues and closing achievement gaps, building a groundswell for better education, early childhood through college. Learn more at pritchardcommittee.org.